Hello. How's it going, everybody? Hi. Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm from Los Angeles, and I have no idea what time it is or what day it is. So everybody can hear me? Yes. Yes. Okay. So thank you guys all so much for coming. My name is Sandra Valde-Hansen, and I'm a cinematographer. And I'm sure. Let me just tell you guys a little bit about myself, because I'm sure you're saying, like, who is this person, and what is this show that she's talking about, because I've never heard of it. But I promise you, by the time that I'm done here, you are all going to be subscribing to Starz, and you're going to be just on the edge of your seat, waiting to see this new show for Starz called Now Apocalypse, which is going to be premiering in the spring of 2019. Yes, very cool. I'm super excited about the show, and I shot it. So, like, yes, you guys are going to love this show. I promise you. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So I came up through the ranks. I was a camera assistant, and then I moved up to being an operator, and then I finally made the leap to being what I've always dreamed of becoming, like a lot of you out there, as a cinematographer. I mean, to be honest with you guys, it's truly an honor to be standing up here at the EnergaCAMERIMAGE Film Festival and getting a chance to really humbly share with all of you my journeys and discoveries on creating this show, and being able to share it with my peers and all of those cinematographers who I've looked up to and wanted to become. And I know most of you all know what that feels like. This particular festival is just so great that we are now here celebrating, like, all that blood, sweat, and tears that we put into the art of cinematography. So I think I'm really excited to be here. So for the last 10 years of my life, I have been focusing on pretty much independent films, mostly narrative. Where, as you guys all know, where resources are really low, very low sometimes, but the creativity and inspiration is really high, and it really gives the opportunity to kind of push the image to the limits. And so I really felt going into Now Apocalypse, I was ready with my kind of indie film background. And I've had the opportunity to work on many different genres, many different films, some of them good, some of them bad. Like, you've probably never seen them. I don't want you to see them, and hope they all die in some film graveyard. But nonetheless, you guys all know what I'm talking about. So the one collaboration that I'm truly, truly blessed to have, and that I've cultivated over the years, is with indie filmmaker Gregg Araki. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. Some of you may have. Awesome, thank you. He's amazing. And for those that you haven't heard, again, as soon as you come out of my presentation, you're going to go out and watch all of his films. Now, let me give you some background on Gregg, because honestly, Gregg's filmmaking will give you a kind of tone that that I will give to you, that will set the kind of look and the visual world of the Starz show Now Apocalypse, which is from his crazy and brilliant mind. So, all right, so Gregg Araki made his first feature film in 1987 called Three Bewildered People in the Night, on a budget of $5,000. Oh gosh, this little microphone is coming off my face. So yeah, on a budget of $5,000. He did everything himself. He directed, he shot, he edited, all on 16mm film. Then, shortly after that, for a little bit more money, for $20,000, he made The Living End, which was nominated for a grand jury prize at Sundance in 1992. And then, since 1992, Gregg has had 9 films at Sundance, including The Doom Generation, which, if you haven't seen it, it's absolutely insane. All I'm saying, it's Rose McGowan and Locust. Okay, just go check it out. And then, of course, the critically acclaimed, beautiful, Mysterious Skin, shot by Steve Gaynor, ASC, and then the somewhat unknown Joseph Gordon-Levitt. You guys all know who he is. So when, in 2009, I got the opportunity to meet up with Gregg, and a few years after I graduated from the American Film Institute in cinematography, and I was absolutely excited and terrified, like I am right now talking to you guys, to get to meet this indie film pioneer. But the fantastic thing is Gregg gave me the opportunity to collaborate with him on the genre-bending thriller comedy called Kaboom, which pretty much challenged my visual storytelling and allowed me to experiment for the first time with color. Now, I didn't tell you guys, my background is actually in documentary. Can you believe that? And so I was able to really come out of my comfort zone, and which I think for all of you guys who are all cinematographers, I think we should all be able to come out of our comfort zones. We should be like visual chameleons that are able to bring anyone's vision to life. So this film I shot on the original RED 1. Yes, yes. The crazy part is, so prior to that, all of Gregg's films were shot on 35 millimeter. Yeah, timing's a bitch, guys, you know? But you know, of course, if you guys all remember with the RED 1, it was a little bit challenging, right? The ISO was somewhere around ISO 320 at an ADA, then it gets to be ISO in the 2 digits. Okay, and we had a lot of night work, but I think we honestly managed to pull it off and create a crazy roller coaster ride of a film. The next time, Gregg and I collaborated 4 years later after Kaboom on the movie White Bird in a Blizzard. I remember getting sent this script at like midnight or something like that, and I stayed up until like 2 o'clock in the morning because I was absolutely mesmerized by the story. I mean, so White Bird is kind of this ethereal fever dream of this young girl's journey into adulthood, all centered around the sudden disappearance of her mother, the fabulous Eva Green. And then also stars the very, very talented Shailene Woodley. I was so excited to do this film because it was very different from anything Gregg had ever done before. The film spans 3 decades from the 1970s to the 1990s, which offered me the opportunity to create different looks to give the audience a sense of where we're at. It also gave me a chance to kind of play around and trying to create this very hypnotic, surreal visuals that represented the main character, Shailene's character, kind of the introspectiveness inside her head. So White Bird was definitely not that wild ride that Kaboom was, but it really still carried Gregg Araki's aesthetic of building visual worlds that kind of teeter between the real and then the surreal. So, you know, Gregg never creates a film or a project or a story that is a direct reflection of reality. His whole process is making some expressionistic version of reality, which I believe is what narrative filmmaking is all about. He wants to capture his audience in this candy-colored, surreal imagery, and if you're really not ready to jump on board and immerse yourself, then you're honestly missing out on an experience. I mean, his films will make you laugh, will make you cry, will make you get angry, and most likely you'll watch it and you'll be like, what the fuck am I watching here? But I promise you, you will never forget his stories. And when Gregg and I work, one of our purposes is to create images that haunt you for the better or for the worse. And now let's talk about Now Apocalypse. So before we dive deep into my creative process with Gregg Araki on the show Now Apocalypse, I want to actually give you guys a disclaimer. So we are now in the tail end of post-production, and Starz was so gracious to allow me to come and talk to you guys about the show with some limitations in terms of what I can show. I mean, so there may be times that you're watching this here and you'll be like, oh, I really want to see an image from the show. I am right there with you. But Starz has given me permission to show some stuff, and so again, I really hope after this thing you're just going to run out and go see the show. So with that being said, now that you guys all have a little bit background into the disturbed but very spellbinding mind of Gregg Araki, I'm going to go ahead and destruct the entire process of how I immerse myself into the head of a very visual filmmaker. I mean, who knows no limits and honestly doesn't really give a shit about what other people think. So Now Apocalypse is a 30-minute thriller comedy for the Starz network. It tells the story of 20-somethings trying to live in the very glamorous life of Los Angeles pursuing love, sex, and fame. Sorry, this thing keeps to move, but okay. So it focuses around our main character of Ulysses, who is really trying to figure out his life, maybe smoking a little too much weed, but he starts to have these apocalyptic encounters with self-proclaimed prophets, and I'm going to say it, guys, aliens. I'm not kidding, aliens. Okay, and that's where our story begins. The show is executive produced by Steven Soderbergh and Greg Jacobs. It's written by Carly Sorcatino, who is Vogue.com's sexpert, and of course Gregg Araki. And all of the episodes, all 10 episodes, were directed by Gregg Araki. So you know, even though Greg and I, you know, had worked together on 2 features, I still had to kind of put my name in the hat. So, of course, I was going to give it my all, and I was going to prepare the hell out of this meeting. So, and when I met with Greg, the first thing that he said to me was, Sandra, I have 2 dreams. Okay? The first dream of mine is to get a standing ovation at Cannes, which he did at Kaboom, and for Kaboom, and I was there. And then his other dream was to make a television show. So I was like, okay, now the pressure's on. I got to get this job, and then I got to bring Greg's life to fruition. So his whole goal was to create a world that existed in the already crazy world of Los Angeles. He wanted to create characters that look and felt very separate from reality, but somehow seamlessly blended into reality. So when I was given the first 3 episodes of the show, I read it, and it was a heightened version of Kaboom and Whitebird. And that's exactly why I showed you guys those trailers, because it gives you an idea of the aesthetic of Gregg Araki and what this show is all about. So when I went into the interview, I created a lookbook for him. And when I actually go into any project, I actually do create some sort of lookbook. I mean, sometimes I show it, sometimes I don't, depending on how the interview is going. But it really prepares me to see what I think is the visual tone of the story. So what I do is I have a folder on my computer, and I have tons of images that I've collected, like via the internet or off of books. I just throw them into this folder, and then when I read a project, I end up, you know, just putting this all together and seeing, and I lay it all out kind of like this. Let me just get rid of the lookbook here. Kind of like this to see if there is a visual tone consistency to what I am thinking about in terms of the look of the show. So luckily, when I showed this to Greg, he absolutely loved it. I was totally on the same page. And then he ended up using this lookbook to show actors or vendors and to get people excited about Now Apocalypse. So I was pretty happy about that. So I got the job, of course. And then what comes next? So now that we have the general tone of the show, Greg and I needed to sit down and go into more specifics and further dive deep into how we are going to make this show look different than what's already out there in the world. So we figured that there were 2 very distinct worlds in Now Apocalypse. So the first world is what Greg called the Sex and the City world. Yuli and his friends, so for all of you who remember Sex and the City, are like Carrie Bradshaw and her friends just trying to make it into Los Angeles. In this world, every frame is out of a high-end fashion magazine. So it's bright, it's luminous, it's poppy, slick, extremely clean, high contrast, glossy, beautiful skin tone, super saturated, you name it. This is what we're trying to go for. These 4 images encompassed that particular beautiful, sexy look, and we wanted everything to pop and look super saturated. But then, juxtaposed to this world is what Greg called the Lynchian Kubrick world. So Yuli and his adventures, like I told you guys, start to have these apocalyptic hallucinations with aliens and prophets and all of this kind of stuff, and he can't really figure out what's going on. So we had to create kind of another visual look that encompasses that. So of course, we're looking for dark and cryptic and hidden and weird, deep blacks, clean shadows, still saturated colors, things coming in and out of the darkness. In these stills, you'll see that your eyes are struggling to see things. But then there are these like colored spots here that all work into accentuating the creepy, but not the beautiful, which is what was seen in the first world. So once Gregg and I defined these two worlds, my approach to any job is to then take it a step even further. So I went in and I did a ton of research, and I gathered tons of visual references from the world of photography, mainly street photography and fashion photography. So in this case, these photographers that I'm going to talk to you about are who inspired me, particularly for the looks of Nowpocalypse. So with Mario Testino and Stephen Klein and Alex Prager, Philip Lorca de Corsia, all of these photographers, I mean, these are so fantastic images, have this wonderful ability of pushing reality to another level, whether it be for a fashion client or whether it be for their own art. In these images in particular, because I have tons of them, the subjects are beyond beautiful, they're beyond glamorous, but then there's a much darker and surreal undertone going on. And that's what I was trying to first achieve and be inspired by for Nowpocalypse. In these slides, so this is Bill Henson and Todd Hito and Patrick Joust and Hannah Starkey. They all deal with things that are super dark and mysterious. They take your everyday surroundings and your everyday people into a much more expressionistic reality, kind of playing with light and dark, just to highlight the drama, the terror, and the possible awe, which is exactly what we wanted to do in Nowpocalypse. So by using all of these photographs became a good foundation to really express what was going on in my head. And I hope that when we put this all together, there was one particular unit or through line that really kind of helped define the mood and the tone of the show. Okay? Now, one of the things that Gregg wanted me to do was find a way to, again, heighten the reality of these worlds that exist in Nowpocalypse. I'm going to keep doing this, guys. So that, we have this kind of true reality of Southern California, but we want to heighten it just a little bit. We wanted, again, the characters of the world to stand out, but then also seamlessly blend into the world. So I said, because Gregg has this penchant for poppy colors and and crazy colors, I said, what about if we try color? I mean, it's out there in the world, but what if we try color and color mixing to light these worlds? Now with the evolution of RGB LEDs, which I'll talk about in a second, we have the endless ability to just throw color anywhere. And so from these stills, I researched on Pinterest. I love Pinterest. I put together kind of a color mixing study of what colors work really well together and how color mixing can make a face look even more extraordinary. So let me show you some examples of what we took away from this kind of color mixing. So in this photograph here, what we really liked was the mixture of this really warm orange and this blue magenta. Okay, one thing you guys have to know, Gregg is in love with blue magenta. I will talk about blue magenta in terms of how he uses it in his process. You'll hear the word blue magenta a lot. But this combination of this really warm and kind of blue magenta became kind of a subtle and subconscious way of talking about the duality between characters and also kind of the duality that happens in the head of single characters. So we really started to use just the warm and the cool. And then, like in this one, I work really closely with my production designer. In this particular one, his name is Todd Felstead. He's a fantastic production designer. And we talked at length about these kind of color mixing ideas. And because we were a TV show and we had to move fast, there was a lot of things that the production designer can do for me in terms of kind of creating this kind of color mixing world. So he gave me all sorts of practical fixtures that would give me this colored light. Like for instance, we have this like red here, but then this green coming from the fluorescence. And again, we would just kind of create this color mixing world. And then this one, the other thing that I wanted to explore with colored lighting was colored lighting from an unmotivated source. I mean, sure all of you do this too, but I usually approach lighting a scene first, where is the existing source? And then, or where should it come from? And then I'll enhance from there. But here, what I wanted to do was take this color lighting just a bit farther and throw color in the frame, taking the world into a totally different dimension. I mean, I firmly believe, guys, if you do something, I mean, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, but if you do something and continually do it, the audience will get on board. I mean, you guys are the visual gatekeepers to the director's vision. You set the rules and the parameters and no one else, and they should go on board with you. So colored lighting in Nowpocalypse is going to be our signature and our tool to make these existing worlds live in an almost parallel universe, which is our kind of psychological way of telling the audience that there is something happening in this world that goes beyond the beauty and the glamour that we all see on the surface. All right. So now that I have my visual references, now that I have these two worlds, now that Gregg has talked, so what I now do is I put all of the stills and kind of assign them to specific locations to kind of get a feel for what the particular locations in our show should kind of feel like, the tone, the mood, And so I put this thing together, and I'm going to actually go back there. So I put this lookbook together, and I pass this on to Gregg for his approval. And then as soon as Gregg says it's okay, I pass this on to my creative team, which is particularly my production designer and my gaffer. So one of the best takeaways I actually had from this show is that my gaffer, Derek Colas, and I made time to look over this lookbook with a fine-tooth comb. We discussed every slide in reference to the story. And then when we went on Tech Scouts, Derek knew exactly what these locations should look and feel like. He didn't even need to talk to me. We would show up and he would be like, yes, I know that the interior part needs to look this way. I know that the ruins of the auto graveyard needs to look this way, and he can then figure out what units we can use. I mean, it was great. One thing I do have to say to all of you is really the importance of the relationship between you and your gaffer. Honestly, you should never really think of your gaffer as a technician. You should think of your gaffer as an artist and a collaborator. If you speak to your gaffer in terms of story, I can guarantee you that your results will be better than you ever imagined. All right? So now that we have a template and a lookbook and a visual language and everything like that, what is the next step? Of course, the fun part, but the hard part begins. I need to figure out what specific tools I'm going to need to bring the visual worlds to life. All right, now let's talk about this. So, well, of course, we start with the camera. RED was my choice because of the amazing support the production received from our executive producer, Steven Soderbergh. I'll admit to you, it's been a little bit since I used the RED cameras, and the arsenal that RED has come out has greatly expanded to just fantastic heights. For me was, which RED camera should I choose? And the only way that I do this is via testing. Is it going to be between the Monstro 8K, VistaVision, or the Helium 8K Super 35? What I'm looking for when I do a camera test are two main things. The camera, for this particular show and for most shows, but the camera that gave me the widest exposure latitude, and then the camera that best rendered colors with the snap and vibrancy that we're looking for Nowpocalypse. So let's dive deeper. So what I do when I decide on a particular camera and do a camera test, I kind of try to keep things really simple and clear cut. I don't like to inundate myself with all sorts of too much information. I'm a cinematographer, guys, but I do really bad with numbers and all this kind of stuff. And so I try to keep things simple, and I do this by shooting 3 different charts. I do just a colored Macbeth chart, an 18% chart for luminance, an 18% gray chart for luminance, and then this DSC one-shot chart because it kind of encompasses it all. And then I shoot this, I put this all set up on this kind of black show card. And what's really great about this whole setup is that it's super simple, so you can do it in like the tiniest of prep bays. You could do this in the production office, you could do this at home, and there'll be a visual consistency if you're trying to like, test different cameras or things like that. I do want to put kind of shout out to Jaron Prasant, ASC. I think you guys all know Jaron. Because I stole this setup from him, so this isn't actually mine. But I did shoot both cameras at 6K, 5:1 compression. I shot at ISO 800, and the reason why I chose ISO 800 because that is actually the ISO that I'm most comfortable with. And then I shot with the standard OLPF, just so you guys know as we move forward into my camera test. I chose to shoot 6K because I actually needed more options in terms of lenses out there, and the show actually had a UHD deliverable, so it wasn't really necessary for us to shoot 8K. So what I'm going to do for you guys now is I'm going to show you a series of slides, overexposing and underexposing, all in one-stop increments. And then what I did was I just color corrected the gray card back to normal, allowing me to see the latitude of the camera. What I want you guys to watch in the next set of slides is first, how far can I push the camera to still maintain a clean image? And then at what point do the colors start shifting in both underexposure and overexposure, okay? So here we go. So this is the Monstro 8K. This is my overexposure test. I did this from normal to +5. I'm going to go quickly through this because I do a comparison in a little bit later on. But I do want you to notice what I noticed quickly is that in +4, that's when the colors started to go a little bit wacky, which is one of the things that I was looking for in a camera. This is the underexposure on the Monstro 8K. And again, I did from normal to -7. And the one thing I do guys want to notice is that probably by -6, you start seeing a little bit of noise in the image. It's still pretty pleasing. I know it's hard because these are all put together on one slide to really see this here. But you still start seeing kind of noise in the blacks, but it's still kind of a pleasing noise. But in the case of Now Apocalypse, because we wanted to go super slick and glossy, I wanted the cleanest image possible. So, all right, let's take a look at the helium. So these are the helium tests again, 6K HD, 5:1, ISO 800. Overexposed from normal to +5. I thought its response was very similar to the Monstro in terms of, the colors start really kind of going off the deep end here at +4. And then this is what kind of answered all of my questions is this is the underexposure on the helium from normal to -7. And I honestly felt that by -5 is when things start getting a little bit muddy and noisy, particularly in the shadow areas in the toe of the curve. So based on this kind of exposure swath, I decided to go with the Monstro. And the reason behind this is because the Monstro appeared to give me the cleanest image possible, particularly in reference to the blacks. So if you look at these two images and just kind of look at the black card and kind of the black areas of the chart, I really felt that the blacks were truer black than the helium. And because of this, I knew that if the blacks are true, then all of the colors will be vibrant and really saturated. That was kind of my thinking behind it. Again, I'm doing these tests, and I can tell you right now, these tests are all really subjective, guys. I mean, you guys can look at this and say, oh, well, I think she's out of her mind. Like, I thought it did this and this at this point. It's really not about what's right or wrong. It's what you feel is going to work for your show. And that's exactly what I came up with when testing these two cameras. Let's take a look. So what I felt, again, what I'm doing is I am starting at +3 and then correcting back to normal. And what I found that when the Monstro, when you correct back at +3, produces still a very clean image, a little more so than the helium, even though the helium does a fantastic job. There are some color shifts in the Monstro, more so in the helium, but I'm more comfortable when the color shifts in the Monstro than I am in the helium, and what I'm talking about is particularly like the skin tone in the DSC chart. And then, really, this is the kind of what put me over the edge, too, with going with the Monstro. So when I corrected back on the Monstro at -5 to normal, and then the noise floor of the Monstro becomes somewhat apparent at -5, while the noise floor in the helium, for me, became more apparent in -4, thus giving me a greater exposure latitude for the Monstro from +3 to -5. And I needed that. I needed to have the cleanest image with the biggest exposure latitude, and that's why I went with the Monstro. All right, so now I have my camera. Let's talk about choosing lenses. Lenses are a huge part of a visual look, and you guys all know that. And so in addition to my fantastic collaboration with RED, I also have a really close-knit relationship with Panavision, particularly Rick Delisle and Guy McVicker at Panavision Hollywood. And so I spoke to Guy McVicker, who is Panavision Hollywood's optics manager, and I showed him that lookbook that you guys all saw earlier. And I was telling him I was looking for lenses that would keep high contrast so I can achieve deep blacks. I can smooth out skin tones and take that edge off of the digital image. And I need lenses that give this kind of oomph to the lens flares, particularly for the Lynchian and the Kubrick world. Because I've been working with Panavision for a bit now, I know their lenses, and I knew right away that I wanted to go with Primos because I was shooting 6K, and I knew most of the Primo focal lengths would cover the 6K format. And the Primos are the sharpest and highest contrast in the Super 35 lens family at Panavision. But I also knew that Panavision has these lens modification recipes that allowed me to modify their lenses so that I could achieve that unique look that I was looking for in the show. Just as an aside, this is my A7 III with a 50mm Primo. It looks kind of nuts, but I occasionally would pop a prime on my A7 III and I would shoot a different angle or something different for the show, and I can tell you right now, Gregg used every single thing I did. He just kind of liked the weirdness of it, but it really did a great job. So let me tell you how I came up with my lens recipe. So in the first set of, that you'll see here of the Primos, this is what I'm calling clean. There is no modification to the images. What I want you to do is pay attention to the contrast in the first frame and the kind of, I don't know if it's really that easy to see here, guys, but kind of the sharpness of the face. And then at the bottom image, notice the lens flares. Okay? So this is the noir lens recipe. So in noir, and again, Panavision here's, and if any of you don't know about this or interested, I'm sure you could go to their booth and talk to them. But what the noir recipe is designed to do is to keep richness in the blacks. Ding, 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 that's exactly what I wanted to do. Very smooth and flattering skin tones. And then but the only thing about the noir is that the lens flares will be slightly less defined, which is not what I want. So I still need to find one other modification to complete my look. So Guy introduced me to CPD1. I was supposed to find out what CPD stands for, and I forgot. Sorry. Okay. So in this set of images, sorry guys, I implemented the Noir 2, which we've already come to the conclusion that I love. I love the Noir because of the rich blacks and the kind of the smoothing of the skin tones. But with CPD1, what it does, it makes the lens flares bolder, and gives it that oomph, exactly what I was looking for. So, so then I knew exactly that this was going to be our recipe for the lenses that would give us that super, kind of sexy, glossy look, but then also add that little bit of creepiness for that Lynchian world with the CPD-1. Let me just show you kind of what I thought was, I think that's a pretty cool flare. This is actually from the show. And just having that flare, I felt, was just a way of just kind of subtly introducing, psychologically introducing to the audience, something weird and creepy is actually happening. So those are my lenses, guys, and that's how actually I use lenses to kind of create my visual look. So the third tool in my tool belt is the color pipeline. So so creating the right looks and the proper image for the pipeline for the show is extremely important. Because we wanted to create such a stylized look for the show, I needed to make sure that everyone from production to post was all on the same page with me. So during pre-production, I needed to find a colorist, a final colorist, who was on board. I need to adjust my mic. With me who was on board with me to experiment and push these cameras to the limits in order to find the right look for the show. And so that's when this is my final colorist, Shaylee Brooks, over at Headquarters Post. I told Shaylee that I needed to accomplish two things within our pipeline. First, I wanted to configure the camera to give me the most optimum color management pipeline because I knew that beyond the broadcast deliverable for Starz, that there was already talks about showing the episodes theatrically at film festivals and then eventually doing an HDR pass. I haven't done the HDR pass. I don't know if we are going to do it. I am still exploring HDR, but I wanted to have a color management pipeline that allowed me to prepare for something like this. And then the second thing that I told Shaylee was I wanted to create a series of looks that I would use throughout to achieve that kind of Sex in the City versus the Lynchian Kubrick world of Now Apocalypse. So this is when Shaylee and I decided to do IPP2. So let me tell you a little bit about RED's IPP2. This is RED's new color management workflow. And so where it all starts is and IPP2, stands for Image Processing Pipeline 2. And to be honest with you, through the IPP2 pipeline, I think the RED color science is rendered the most versatile than it ever has before. I really had the ability to really stretch that image and use that image to my advantage. So the first part of the IPP2, obviously you have your camera, but the first part of IPP2 is to pick your primary raw transform. And in this case, you'll pick a color space of red, wide gamut RGB, and then you will pick your gamma curve of log 3G10. When I set this, because you guys all, in terms of with the RED, you can set your gamma curve and your color space. And I honestly felt that with both red, wide gamut RGB and log 3G10, that RED was encoding its image in its full range. The second part of the IPP2 is creating your creative look. And then obviously as you create your creative look, you will then create a 3D LUT that can be imported into your camera. And then the third part of the IPP2 workflow is choosing the proper output transform. The output transform is made up of a transform to your target display, your director's monitors, your video village, with a tone map of your choice in terms of contrast, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later, plus how you want your highlight roll-off. And I think this is one of the greatest things about IPP2 is their really well-designed output transforms. So these are my favorite things about IPP2. So first of all, the IPP2, and particularly again for our show, is so challenging colors are handled much better than before. And that's what I needed, because you can see we are really going extremely with color on Now Apocalypse. And then the highlights felt more filmic because you have much better control of highlight roll-off. But this was my absolute favorite. I had the ability to control contrast per scene or situation with the RED's well-designed output transforms. So these output transforms, which I'll show you in a second, have easily changeable tone map curves all right at my fingertips. Because Gregg was looking for colors and faces that snapped, being able to adjust the contrast curve on the fly without having to change or compromise lighting was absolutely key to me being fast and efficient. Let me just show you what I'm talking about here. This is my daughter. But so what's amazing is, you know, here we had my look, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But because I was able to, with their output transforms, either go from medium to high contrast, just by changing the output transforms, I was able to give that pop and look quite quickly to the scene. Or if for some reason there was a lot of, the contrast range on the image was too much, I could easily go back to the medium or even to the low contrast. I mean, this really saved my life during the show. So let's talk about my looks. So in pre-production, Shaylee and I created looks for the show. So when I approach creating looks, I try to create 2 or 3 general looks that will work for the entire project. I honestly, I don't necessarily work with a DIT. I just don't have time to kind of be in a tent adjusting things with a DIT. I know they're absolutely invaluable, but I just don't work that way. And so I work with my final colorist to implement the most important aspects that define the look of our show. So for Nowpocalypse, the things that we adjusted in my looks have to do with contrast. I mean, pretty standard, but contrast, saturation, and beautiful skin tones. So this is my first look that I created. So again, here, what we're seeing right now is just the output transform. So let me just show you. This is our normal day look. And what we wanted to do was create a look, and it worked. Create a look that would work for both normal day interior and exterior. So what we did in this look, I'm going to go back here to show you, is we started by first removing, so the output transform does have a little bit of a green shift to it. So we removed that, and then we balanced daylight and set density based on exposure and lighting conditions for a normal day situation. We tended to let the skin tone have that blue magenta that I talked to you guys about to help achieve that skin tone that Gregg absolutely loves. I have to say, I'm going to do this again here. Gregg hates the color green, and he hates yellow skin tones. So whenever you see anything, if you likely see green in the show, this is a secret, guys. You know bad things are going to happen. Just keep that in mind, okay? This is the other look that we created was normal night interior. Again, this is just the output transform. I'll show you here. This is it. So again, all we did was take the green that occurs with the output with the Rec 709 transform. We add a little bit more density and saturation to the scene, and then we corrected the image to feel more like a tungsten interior because 65% of the show occurs in these apartments for our main characters, so it was really important to create a good kind of interior general LUT. And then the third one is normal night exterior. Again, we took out the green shift, and then we added a little bit more contrast and saturation based on exposure and the lighting conditions of a night exterior. But in addition, we added the blue magenta to help pop the colors the way the director likes. Now, what I found during the process of shooting the show is I was able to actually use the normal night interior and the normal night exterior. Actually, I was able to use the normal night exterior to pop colors when needed. And let me show you what I mean. So here is an image. This is my camera assistant in one of our tests. This is the output transform. And this is our normal night interior. And then I'm like, you know what? I really need to kind of pop the colors here because we have a lot of different scenes that kind of encompass this look. So I just switched my LUT to normal night exterior, and it like gave it that kind of pop that we needed. So this is kind of a look of the output transforms. It looks a little intimidating at first. I was like, oh, that's a lot. But I have to say, because I had these three versatile looks, and then plus these kind of well thought out output transforms with contrast control, I ultimately had like 48 different ways of changing the look of the show, but really quickly. I didn't have to, for me anyway, going through like 30 or 40 different LUTs for me it's just too confusing. Like I said, I like to keep things really simple for me. But the one other thing that I used in this show is white balance. Hey, white balance. I was kind of messing around and testing, and I found that, just kind of switching white balance, either between daylight and tungsten, I could kind of tweak the color, skew the colors in the show pretty creatively. In this particular, because we do have a lot of night exteriors, sodium vapor and mercury halides. We used actual sodium vapor and mercury halides for the show. It was one of our lighting units, so that we could really work quickly, and then we could also kind of see them in camera. So in this particular slide, this is our location of the auto graveyard. Gregg really wanted to have two different looks to kind of create the further mystery of the Lynchian kind of Kubrick world. But he didn't actually tell. I mean, we had a lot of conversations, but I guess as we were shooting, he told me this kind of right off the bat, just really quickly, and I was like, what can I do without having to change our kind of lighting setup? And so I ended up using white balance to kind of accomplish this. So as you should see, the top slide is set for 5600, rendering a kind of a normal look that would kind of stay true to the oranges and the sodium vapors and the neutral blue of the mercury halides. And then the bottom one, which was at 3200 Kelvin, the oranges now shift to this kind of yellow-green, creepy, right? Yellow-green. And then the blue becomes this kind of deep, poppy, saturated blue. This is actually a still from our show. So this is kind of how I created the actual look in camera for Now Apocalypse. So let's kind of recap. Okay, so where are we at? I have a RED MONSTRO exposing. I ended up, guys, exposing at ISO 1600 because I actually needed to protect more into the shadows. I shot 6K HD, and then I actually framed for 5.5. One of the things that Gregg and I spoke about, because we would be moving at such a fast-paced environment, this is television, Gregg wanted a little bit more room to adjust the frame if needed, with my blessing. And so that's why we shot 6K HD and framed for 5.5. Then we, of course, shot at a 5:1 compression. And then Panavision Primo primes and zooms modified to Noir 2 and CPD 1, and then the IPP2 workflow. And what I have to really kind of emphasize is working with my final colorist and Daly's colorist solidified my ability to maintain that look through the entire pipeline. And I believe as cinematographers, we all must be at the forefront of decision making when it comes to color management. Absolutely. And because of what I did here with picking up the right tools out of my toolbox and the IPP2 workflow, it really helped me do this. All right, guys. So now let's talk about lighting. So now we have the camera, we have the lenses, but what is the next step in order to accomplish this kind of Sex in the City world versus the Lynchian Kubrick world? So the next piece in the puzzle is lighting. We have to create a stylized look where color, again, is absolutely essential in bringing this world to life. But before we do that, I've got to pick a successful cinematographer is only as good as their crew. So I needed to find a gaffer and a key grip who understood the fast-paced world of television, but understood the restraints of indie filmmaking. So this is my gaffer, Derek Colas, and this is my key grip, John Minardi. If you ever work with John, he's kind of a legend in the business. He will wear this same outfit every day. Okay, just had to say that. So at the so as I mentioned in the beginning to you guys, my gaffer Derek and I had an extensive conversation of what the look of the show should be. And so based on our conversations, we ultimately knew that we had to do the following 3 things. So number 1 is pick gear that would allow us to be small and portable so that we could be fast and efficient and use less people power. So I'm going to show you what our equipment package, our lighting package look like. That's it. I mean, we supplemented a light here and there, added like some sodium vapors or mercury halides, but this was our basic package for the entire run of the show. So then the next thing that Derek and I said must happen is we must choose locations with the right available light. We need to find locations that had available light that worked for our story, and then we could enhance at our own discretion. So I'm going to show you actually some behind the scenes. So here, our Yuli, our main character, kind of gets around town on his bicycle, and we had many sequences with Yuli kind of cycling around the valley. And I went out on my own and scouted streets in the valley that were pretty well lit by existing streetlights. And the one thing I found, and I embraced, that in Los Angeles actually, so they're kind of getting rid of, they're phasing out the sodium vapors and the mercury halides and putting actual LEDs. So I kind of embraced that, and I found a street in the valley that had this wonderful color mix of oranges and blues and yellows and greens, you name it. So I told production we're going to shoot there. And so and then all we had to do was we just added a LED Astera tube to our rig here, which is a grip tricks with a jib arm. And then I had the ability to change the intensity and the RGB of the Astera tube by this little dimmer board on the camera car that the electric set up for me. And that's all we had to do night exterior kind of driving and cycling. Here, let me show you this. So, sorry about this. So because LA has some great locations where the city lights kind of glow in the background and wanted this to be a motif in our show, having city lights twinkle in the background can only add magic to your scene. So this scene, in this scene, I told the gaffer that there was this actually existing mercury halide here, and I was like, this is where I want my entire key for the show, for this scene. And he was like, okay, all right. So all we did was use this existing source and then just add our own little sources there to enhance the scene. So in this scene, we had basically the mercury halide, 2 baby sky panels right here, and a quasars for some fill. We did add on the left, this is actually our sodium vapor, but this over here is what was already existing there. And that was it for a whole night exterior. And so in this slide, again, we're talking about these kind of city lights glowing in the background. And we wanted this, again, to be a motif for our show. And having those city lights just kind of added something to the scene. So what we wanted to do here is we wanted to create kind of this colorful, romantic, intimate location. And so we chose this overlook. But all we had to do for this night exterior is add 2 sky panels, 1 blue, 1 orange. There is a condor here. I guess you guys can't see it, right? And then 1 sky panel bounced into unbleached muslin. And again, that was it. What I like about this behind-the-scenes shot is it's supposed to be in a romantic scene, so hopefully you'll remember this when you see the show. So it's this really kind of romantic scene. Little does everybody know that behind camera is this big, smelly dumpster. So just remember that as you're watching the show. So that's all about available lights. That was the second thing that Derek and I wanted to make sure happened in the show. The third thing is finding fixtures that would be able to create colors quickly so that we could design our color palette as quick and thoughtful as possible. All right. So, of course, the answer to all of this is RGB LED fixtures. Even though there is nothing that can compare to a tungsten fixture with a softbox, with a nice softbox to key a face. I was very excited to light the show mostly all on LEDs because this is what made sense for the show. We needed to move quick. We had very little manpower in comparison to TV shows. Like what my electric team looked like was gaffer plus best boy plus 2 electrics. And then on the key grip side, it was key grip plus best boy plus 1 grip. We had 2 dolly grips, but again, they're always busy. So it's literally key grip, best boy, and 1 grip. So in the television world, this is considered pretty much a very small crew. So we needed to, we could supplement here and there, but ultimately we needed to use fixtures that made us move quick. The other plus point, as you guys all know, is with LEDs, they have the ability to change color via RGB. I could do a whole other lecture on LEDs, but my gaffer should be part of that conversation. But having color as our signature of our show world would not have been remotely possible if I had to do this all via tungsten or daylight fixtures and then changing different gels. Our lighting decisions were not always purely story-driven. Sometimes my gaffer, Derek, and I had to choose colors from the gut and what seemed to work well at the time. But whenever we were stuck in figuring out what color we needed, we always went back to the narrative. So one of the things that I want to preface here is I'm not saying that LEDs are absolutely the way that you should light everything. They're just another tool in our massive toolbox that that we as cinematographers use and what works for the story, what works for your story, and what works for your production. So it's just another tool in the toolbox. Because we were using LEDs, they could all be hooked up to a dimmer board via DMX. We use dimmer boards on both location and stage work, and that was absolutely essential for us in Now Apocalypse. I'll show you what I mean. So this is actually the dimmer board setup. It doesn't have to be this crazy setup. This is a picture of a Vista system, all run, again, my gaffer should be here to talk about this, but the little I know, it's all run off of a laptop with some necessary hardware. And so what happens is, this is actually a layout of our apartment set from Now Apocalypse. The squares each represent a lighting fixture or a dimmer channel. And because we didn't rig too much on this set, the squares mostly represent practicals, which are the orange, and then blue, which are actually wall outlets. So what happens is, in this particular setup, you can see the squares all represent different LED units. They represent LED lights and change color to reflect the color of the light fixture that's giving out at that particular moment. Our dimmer board, Chris, would use this laptop system. He uses as a touchscreen. So the process of setting up the color involves selecting one or more of the squares, and then by tapping or dragging with your finger, you can then go into the rainbow color window over here and kind of adjust what color you're looking for. And then below that window is RGB and CMY or HSV hue, saturation, and value sliders that but you kind of use whatever you're most comfortable with. So that way, like for us, we ended up using RGB. So my gaffer could easily say to his dimmer bird op, give me 10 points more of blue, 20 points less of green, and we could then tune our colors pretty precisely at the fly in the moment. So I want to take a look and show you some behind the scenes of how we used LEDs in Now Apocalypse. So this is one of our apartment scenes, and all we lit this scene was with 3 Astera tubes. The tube on the left was emulating an existing practical that we set for the room. The tube here representing this light, and this was just basically for fill. That's it. In here is a bar location, and I know on this particular day we had to do 3 bar scenes, each 2 pages each, plus 2 night exteriors. And so we set up these bar scenes pretty quickly with just these Astera tubes on the bottom for some fill, something different, and then LED strip lights right over here. And here, this is another example of how RGB was essential to the look of Now Apocalypse and all of that color mixing that I was talking to you earlier. So here we had 3 hex pars. These are Chauvet pars. They're basically theatrical pars that you guys can buy for pretty cheaply. But they do have RGB W plus amber, so you have a lot more color ability with the hex pars. And then we had these LED tubes in the background. And basically I remember, because this is a little bit of a surreal sequence, the gaffer and I, through the dimmer board, was able to just try to find the color combinations that worked, and this is what we came up with. So I'm going to take just a few minutes to go off on a slight tangent and talk to you. You know, I really loved LEDs for the show, but I ran into a little problem with LEDs. And I've been speaking to LED manufacturers and cinematographers and gaffers who all also confirm this issue. I'm bringing this up now, so if anyone has any opinions on this or more information about this to discuss about this further, come and talk to me during the festival. LEDs and color, a color conundrum. So one of the characters in our show of Now Apocalypse, we wanted, when this character would appear, we wanted them to be bathed in this golden yellow backlight like the beautiful Emma Thompson is in Angels in America, shot by Steven Goldblatt, ASC. And we found that the perfect yellow was Roscoe 2003, which is Storaro yellow, right? And now, with a lot of LEDs out there, the ability to generate this particular gel color is, you know, you can, now that with the LEDs that are out there, you can actually, right now, generate the color via the unit. You guys all know that. Or you can actually color mix them with RGB. Well, we wanted to generate out of the particular unit this Storaro yellow gel color, or kind of color mix it via RGB to produce this color. Well, I couldn't. I could not produce Storaro yellow via the LED. And let me show you what I mean. Here's a test that my gaffer shot during production to illustrate this issue. So we shot this with the Monstro, and what you'll see here is, so this is obviously a tweenie at 3200, a sky panel at 3200, a tweenie with Roscoe 2003, a sky panel with Roscoe, the actual gel, on 2003, and this is the sky panel generating 2003. That's not the yellow I'm looking for. Now, I want to say to you guys, because everybody says, well, you know, it's kind of about the camera. It's actually not about the camera. It's actually about the LED technology, because I'll show you. This is my A7 III, Sony A7 III. Same results. Again, sky panel generating. This is Storaro yellow. We didn't do tests with Asteras or any of the other area products. This is all across the board in LEDs. This is kind of an example of all of this together, right? So ultimately, you know, LED technology has come a long way, but the technology, I feel, is still not there to reproduce narrow spectrum colors like yellow. So you honestly can't determine a color of an LED by using your naked eye because of this limitation. I don't have time or the expertise to go into the science of this, but my point here is that when you're using LEDs and you need to produce a specific color for your story, please, you have to actually test. You know, I went into this show with very limited testing time, and I assumed that the LED would be an answer to everything, and I was wrong. So this is definitely a crutch, but I know that there's ever-changing technology out there, and again, I would love to talk to someone if they have more information about this. But in the meantime, guys, don't throw out your roll of party gels, because you know you're going to have to. There are certain colors in the LED world that you're going to have to do the old-fashioned way. All right? So now that I've gone off my tangent, I want to just tell you a little bit about our production and then go into post. So Now Apocalypse, again, 10 episodes. Each episode, 40 pages long, okay? Which equals 400 pages. We had 40 days to shoot, which ultimately means 10 pages a day. What? Yes, I know, but we did it. And so now, to conclude my presentation, before I came to EnergaCAMERIMAGE, I was finishing up my last day of final color. And again, I wish I could show you some things from the show, but let me talk to you a little bit about our post-production stages and then show you some stills from Now Apocalypse. So the one thing that I want to, again, just really emphasize for me is that kind of communication between production and post. And so the most important thing to me is having a dailies colorist. I insisted on production to every night get a hard drive of the day's footage. Yes, that means at camera wrap, I didn't take off my meter and say, like, out, I'm out. No, I didn't. I waited for the loader to hand over the drive, and sometimes I was the last one to leave on set. And what I would do is I would take that hard drive, and I would bring it into RED X Pro, and I would adjust the footage if needed, and then I would export stills to my dailies colorist with written notes. These are all of my emails to him. And then when he was done, he would send me stills so that I could approve. So, and you guys all know that, you know how directors end up loving the look in dailies, right? Right? So this process helps me maintain the look from production all the way through post. So then, when we went into final color, it was integral, because Gregg, of course, fell in love with dailies, because what he saw on the set versus what he saw on the dailies was all the same. And so, when we got to final color, we had to use our daily color as a starting point. Let's take a look at our workflow. So again, we carried on IPP2 in our pipeline. Headquarters worked off of native R3Ds still, but then going red wide gamut RGB and log 3G10. And then, of course, we started our dailies with the CDLs from our daily session out of ColorFront, and then we would final color grade from there. And then, of course, we have our output transform to Rec 709. But what's amazing about IPP2 is that if we were going to go to a theatrical release, and that's P3 color space, we would just have to change this output transform with maybe a slight trim pass. Or if we were doing HDR, it would be kind of the same thing. And that's what I really love about this whole color management workflow. So, now that I've talked to you guys about the process of how I put this all together, the creative process in my mind and working with the director, I'm going to show you a little bit of the end result. So I'm going to show you some stills from the show. And what we're going to be looking at is first the log 3G10, then the dailies color, and then the final color. What I want you guys to notice is that there's very minimal adjustments from what we shot in production to the final grade. Because again, we were all prepared in discovering the world, we chose the right tools for the story, and we implemented the look via in-camera, i.e. lighting, right? So now, here's a glimpse into Now Apocalypse. All right. So, here's our log 3G10. Here's our dailies. Do we need to turn off the lights? Yes, turn off the lights, or turn off that, okay. And then this is our final color. And again, sorry guys, these are the stills that were approved for me, but I think they'll give you a good idea of what I'm talking about. This is the log 3G10. This is dailies. And this is final color. Here it is again. Dailies. Final color. Here. Dailies. Final color. Dailies, final color. Dailies, final color. Dailies, log 3G10, dailies, and final color. dailies, and final color. You know, and that's pretty much now Apocalypse for Starz, premiering in 2019. I hope you guys really loved this presentation and got an idea of what is going on in my head. I really hope you go check it out in the spring of 2019. And I just want to thank my amazing team that made this all possible, and all the vendors out there, and Gregg Araki, and then, of course, to Red, Jared Land, and Nada Albright, and Cherie Quigley, and the entire Red team for giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you guys. And I hope I get to talk to all of you guys out there in the festival. I'll be here until Sunday. But I guess that's pretty much it. Thank you guys very much. I think we have a couple of minutes for questions, if you guys have any questions of me. Also, we do have some Red folks here that if you have any technical questions, but does anybody have any questions? Oh, where? Oh, hi, yes. I think there's a, I don't know if there's a mic, or you could just, okay.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Right, so just a quick question on the last bit of the presentation that you mentioned you were using CDLs as starting points for the grade.
Right.
Which are kind of limited in what they can do. So I was just wondering if they got you close enough to the look that you developed at first, or not really.
No, they did. They absolutely did. Because the CDLs were actually built in dailies. And so then we were able, and we obviously looked at dailies and loved what we were looking at, and we were then just be able to apply them to final color. But again, it's just as a base. It's just as a base. So yes, this is, so even though there are limitations to CDLs, it actually worked for our show. Yeah. Anybody else? I'm not, oh, yes. Oh. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Resolve 15, yes. Resolve 15. Yes.
Television series are notoriously short on prep time, and I was very impressed with how much you talked about how much prep you did, and I was wondering if you could talk about how you prepped, how much time you had to prep, maybe shortcuts that you had to take due to limited time for prep, etc.
So I'll be absolutely honest. Actually, I had a very short prep time. I had 4 weeks. And so what I ended up doing, particularly if I, not saying that this is the way to go, but I ended up doing a lot of work outside of my official prep time.
As we do.
Yes, as we all do. I did actually a lot of my camera testing outside of prep time because I knew as soon as I was going to get into prep that I was just going to kind of hit the ground running. So I guess the only advice I have is, like, if you guys are about to start a big project and you're in the throes of trying to figure out what camera, try to get into your favorite rental house and try to do some quick camera test, or try to do some camera tests. I mean, all of the rental houses are out there, are so helpful, and that's actually what I did. I ended up going to rental houses before my official prep. I just spent a day and I looked at all the different cameras, and then I already had all of that work done, and then I could go into the others. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Being that it was a singular director, were all the scripts finished in advance, that you knew the arc of the show, and were things cross-borted?
Yes, we were actually very lucky with that because him and Carly had written already all 10 episodes. And one of the things that Gregg does, and this is also one of the reasons why we were able to complete this show in 40 days at 10 pages a day, is because the director knew exactly what he wanted. He actually storyboards things out. I mean, when I say storyboards, they're like these little stick figures on the margins of a script. But we knew going in exactly what he wanted, and he would only do what he needed. I mean, it was the only way to get this show done. I mean, he did have editorial control, so that also was really helpful, which doesn't happen a lot in television. So, you know, there were some plus points being a low-budget TV show. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because obviously 10-page day is
Yeah.
a lot. Just in terms of discipline, you know, of setups, was there stuff that you wanted that you didn't have time for? And then the quick decision making that you have to go, okay, we need to get this done because we need to move on, and you know, that sort of shooting
Yeah,
that
so
much
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So
Sorry?
just wanted to know a bit more about, you know, was there stuff that you couldn't get because you had to shoot 10 pages a day, and just a discipline that you've got to be like, we have to move on now. We've got that shot. There may be things you want to adjust a little bit. In the ideal world, you always want to make it a little bit more finesse, but just a bit more about, you know, the struggles of having to do 10 pages a day, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to do a 10-page day, you need to have a director who's absolutely on board with this and understands what that actually means. And like I said before, Gregg was essential in that. I mean, he knew exactly what we needed to accomplish, and it was him who basically was the one who set the tone and said, look, we got it. You know, we did take 1, take 2, we're done. And then I had to actually sit with my creative team, and I'm going to be like, guys, you know, we don't necessarily have all this time to tweak, so when I feel that it's good, I'll let you know, and that's just the way we had to do it. We just had to really put, the one other thing that we ended up doing is actually putting time limits on, we had an AD who was fantastic, but then I also had to kind of put time limits on myself, with the understanding that I needed to look. One of the things that I think you guys should do is look at it from a big picture standpoint and look at like kind of time the day out on your own, not just rely on your AD, because you know they have tons of other things to do. So that's my advice. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation first, and I have 2 questions actually.
Sure.
I saw your monitoring setup, and you were talking about not working with the DIT. So who was? There was obviously a waveform monitor. So who controlled the images and the look on set?
Right.
How did you do that? And which monitor technology did you use, OLED or LCD technology? And second question would be, how many LUTs in the final shooting did you use?
Okay, so as far as the actual setup that you saw, so the loader, he set it up. He set up the waveforms and the 2 monitors, which were all OLEDs. But in terms of controlling the image, it was all me. I was the one who was looking at the waveforms. I was looking at false color. I mean, my loader would just troubleshoot because we had some problems with our waveforms and things like that. But for the most part, I was the one that was basically controlling exposure from start to finish. And again, because of the way we set things up, I really wanted to keep things simple because, again, I don't like to be inundated. So we ended up with just 3 looks that I ended up. And the one thing I would like to do in the future is actually have a LUT box. In this case, I basically was radioing my AC, like go to that LUT, go to this LUT, but it was only 3. It was actually only 3 that we work with, so it was really kind of easy and quick because I knew I just didn't have the time to do all of that. Yeah, so it was just all me. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, hello. I would like to ask, I'm not sure if you were talking about Rec 709 you used. How were you dealing with losing information in blue tones because of the compression and all this stuff? It was a problem.
It wasn't actually. I mean, because again, in IPP2, they have these Rec 709 output transforms, and if you saw all of that really long list, you have the ability to with using those output transforms, you have the ability to choose how you want your highlights to roll off and how you want your contrast to be. And so the way that it's built, and we do have Michael Rintol here, who from RED, who can talk a little bit more specifically about this. But because of that ability, I never really had any sort of problems with colors because the RGB, the red wide gamut RGB and the log 3G10, that particular it just actually covers the entire tonal range of the red. I mean, it's really amazing. I mean, I would definitely go that route if you're shooting RED cameras, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and I did have one more.
Hi. In pre-production, you said that Panavision modified their lenses to give you the look when it was Noir +1 and TBD2. How did they do that? Did they do that with filtration or?
No, so they actually go in there and modify it themselves. They don't actually say how they do it.
Right.
You can ask them, but I don't know if Dan Sasaki will give away his secrets. But it's all internally with all of the elements of the lens. But you should actually talk to them about it. I've tried, and they're just like, this is what it looks like. If you like it, you like it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Great, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just quick curiosity. You mentioned you were monitoring OLEDs. I'm just wondering if you had the slightly lifted black levels to like match most TV sets out there or not.
No, we
Right.
didn't. We just kept the OLEDs. What we ended up doing prior to the show is taking the OLEDs to post and having all of our post monitors and our on-set monitors calibrated so they all matched. And that was really integral. Now moving forward, if we ever do season 2, guys go watch it, season 2. We are going to actually have Gregg have a monitor at his home also calibrated to whatever post and everything. And then I will also have maybe a monitor at home as well, because I think it's essential that we are all communicating the same image. Obviously, you know, displays will change, iPads, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But if we have a consistency at least on the high end, then that's all we should really kind of care about, yeah.
You're working in 709 for TV, using a lot of color for let's say storytelling. I'm wondering if you would work in P3 or 2020, if you would go all the way to the heavy saturated colors that you get from LED, or if you would desaturate again, just like you have in 709. Obviously, in 709 you go up to the maximum saturation the color space can allow. Mm-hmm. But will you go much further if you go to P3 or 2020?
Potentially. I mean, obviously, I had to consider my final output, my final deliverable ultimately, which was broadcast. And so, I mean, like I said before, there was a chance of doing a theatrical kind of viewing or even an HDR pass, but that wasn't set in stone. So I knew broadcast was going to be we knew for sure that was going to be the final deliverable output. And so I felt like that going Rec 709 was kind of the smart way to go. And again, with RGB, with red wide gamut RGB and log 3G10, those kind of out of gamut colors, you truly do get a very broad range. You know, maybe not so much if you were working in P3 or if you're working in Rec 2020, but at the very least, for a broadcast deliverable, I was pretty happy. Yeah.
I actually, if I'm talking about storytelling or for the mood itself, you think you would have gone further if you could, not thinking it's 709 restricted, but if you wanted to work on the mood, you would have used that extra saturation or not?
Again, I think it comes down to what the final output is. You know, I never really, you know, to be honest with you, I didn't even think about that. You know, I just kind of had to look at what I had to do in order for the network's purposes. But I agree with you now, like now that I've gone through the show, and just even thinking about, you know, HDR and Rec 2020, I mean, I think, yeah, we actually, the funny thing is my colorist and I, as soon as this show is done, we're going to actually look at, you know, just kind of some testing to see, you know, particularly with like LED tubes, like how far we could have actually gone. No, and I absolutely see what you're saying. But again, I just had to stick to the limitation from the network. But we are going to look into it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm wondering if you tried to achieve the Storaro yellow gel color manually on the sky panels, or did you just use the pre-programmed program?
I'm sorry? Oh, if we use the
I mean, while testing the Storaro yellow,
yeah.
Did you just use the pre-programmed pattern for it on the sky panel, or did you try to achieve the color manually?
We did. We did try to try to create the color manually via RGB.
And it still didn't work.
It still did not work. Yeah, I mean, the sky panels, the Astera tubes, we tried everything, and it was producing that kind of red look. I mean, it was a little bit frustrating, so we just ended up having to put a gel. Yeah, so it was all, yeah, we tried all of that. I think that's my time here, but thank you guys so much. I look forward to seeing you at the festival and enjoy the rest of Camera Image. Thanks, guys.